My name is Claire. I'm 34 and I've spent the last 9 years as a paralegal at an estate planning firm in Asheville. I've sat through more will readings than I can count. I know what a valid codicil looks like. I know when a notary stamp is out of compliance. I know down to the county how to pull deed records, trust filings, and beneficiary designations before anyone else in the room has finished pouring their coffee. So when my grandmother's attorney called to schedule the reading of her estate and mentioned, almost in passing, that there was an updated document we'd be reviewing, I didn't panic. I went to my office. I pulled every public record attached to Eleanor May Holloway's name. And what I found in those files told me exactly what my parents had done and exactly how far they had underestimated me. They thought the folder in my hands when I walked into that reading was just my notepad. It wasn't. And the moment my father finished smiling at the attorney's summary and turned to me with the expression of a man who has just cashed a check, I opened it. Welcome to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people survive impossible family moments with their dignity intact. If you've ever been erased from something that was meant for you, this one is yours. Drop a comment, hit subscribe. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My grandmother, Eleanor May Holloway, was 5'2", kept a dictionary on the kitchen table for crosswords, and made the best sweet potato pie in 3 counties. She lived in the same house in Weaverville for 41 years. White clapboard siding, green shutters, and a porch that wrapped around the front and halfway down the side. She grew tomatoes in clay pots she'd painted herself. Deep blue and terracotta, arranged in a row along the porch railing like she was keeping score of something only she knew the rules to. She called me every Sunday at 7:30 regardless of time zone because she said Sunday evenings were when people most needed to hear a familiar voice. I was the one who drove her to eye appointments. I was the one who refilled her prescriptions, organized her filing cabinet, and sat with her on that porch every Thanksgiving morning while my parents slept in and my brother Derek watched football with the sound too loud. She used to say, "Claire Bear, you were born knowing how to show up." I thought she was being grandmotherly. She wasn't. She was describing something she had watched me do for 30 years and was quietly making plans around. I need to tell you who my parents are before I tell you what they did, because the what only makes sense inside the who. My father, Frank Holloway, is 62. He retired early from a manufacturing job at 58 and has spent the 4 years since then in a state of industrious complaint. The kitchen needs updating. The truck is too old. The neighborhood has changed. Things cost too much. Frank had a philosophy about money that I understood by the time I was 10. It was always scarcer when he was expected to spend it and always more available when he expected to receive it. My mother, Sandra, is warmer on the surface but operates the same engine underneath. She was the one who asked me for money in a gentle way. The suggestion disguised as concern, the favor framed as logic. "Claire, it just makes more sense for you to handle that one. You understand these things. You understand these things were her version of you owe us, spoken in a register soft enough to make it difficult to push back against without feeling like the unreasonable one." My brother Derek is 30. He's not cruel. He's just absent in the way that youngest children sometimes are. The ones who got the softened version of the household because the older sibling absorbed most of the edges. Derek means well, the way furniture means well. It holds up the room without doing anything about it. I moved to Asheville at 25 for the job. I'd taken paralegal courses at community college after a year of temp work following my bachelor's and discovered I was good at it. Not good, the way people are good at things they enjoy. Good, the way people are good at things they were built for. Patterns, documents, details, the way legal language says one thing on the surface and another 3 inches underneath. I loved the precision of it. I loved that in estate law, a single word placed wrong could collapse an entire intention. Nana was the reason I came home every 6 weeks. Not my parents. Not Derek. Nana. The summer I was 27, she called me on a Sunday evening, not at 7:30, but at 4 in the afternoon, which was unusual enough that I answered before the second ring. She said she'd been talking to a lawyer and wanted to tell me something. When she asked me to keep it between us for now, I didn't press. I just said, "Of course, Nana." She told me what she'd done. I held that information the way you hold something fragile in both hands. Carefully. Without showing anyone. I need to tell you what I was doing when the call came that she had died. Nana passed on a Thursday in February. She was 81. Her heart, the doctor said, had simply been working very hard for a very long time. I took Friday off, drove the 2.5 hours home, and stood in the kitchen of her house smelling sweet potato and dish soap and old wood, and felt the particular grief that lives in familiar rooms after the person who made them familiar is gone. My parents were already there when I arrived. Frank sat at the kitchen table, eating a sandwich he'd made from Nana's refrigerator. Sandra was in the living room with a tape measure pressed to the window frame. She looked up. She was measuring for window treatments, she said, in case they decided to update the space. I set my bag down, said nothing. That was the first signal. I filed it the way I file every operational detail at work. Silently, permanently, completely. 3 weeks before the reading, the attorney's office called. His name was Gerald Marsh. a solo practitioner in his late 60s with an office on Oak Street above a dry cleaner and next to a tax preparation service. His assistant, a woman named Patrice, left me a voicemail. She said Mr. Marsh wanted to schedule the reading of Eleanor Holloway's estate with all immediate family present. She gave me the date and the time, and then she added, almost as an afterthought, that we'd be reviewing the original estate documents as well as an updated document that had been filed last spring. Updated document. I played the voicemail again. Updated document. Filed last spring. Nana passed in February. Last spring meant approximately 10 months before her death. I opened my laptop and typed 2 words on a blank document. Updated document. Then I pulled up the Buncombe County Recorder of Deeds website in a new browser tab and entered my grandmother's name. Eleanor May Holloway. The records loaded in under a minute. There was a deed transfer, dated 6 years earlier. Eleanor May Holloway to the Holloway Family Revocable Living Trust. Grantor, Eleanor May Holloway. Trustee, Claire Holloway. My breath left my body in a slow, steady exhale. My name was on it. As successor trustee and sole beneficiary of the trust. Whatever the revised will said, whatever my parents had convinced Nana to sign in her final year, the house had never been in her estate to begin with. It had transferred into the trust 6 years ago. It had been mine, legally and quietly, since I was 28 years old. I sat in my office chair for a long time. Then I pulled every document I could access publicly. The trust deed, the trust instrument recorded with the county, and the full chain of title on the property. I printed all of it. I organized it into a plain manila folder, the kind we use at our firm for client intake packets. Then I called Mr. Marsh directly. He was pleasant. Careful. The way estate attorneys are careful when they know a family is about to walk into a room carrying different versions of the same story. I told him I was a paralegal in estate law. I wasn't calling to challenge anything, I said, just to understand what kind of document we'd be reviewing. He paused. Then he told me that Eleanor had engaged him last March to revise her will. The revision had altered the distribution of her estate. He couldn't share specifics before the reading, but he wanted me to know the document was fully executed and in order. Fully executed and in order. I thanked him. I hung up. I added his words to the document on my screen and went back to the county records. I also called my colleague Renata that week. Renata has been a paralegal for 22 years and has the particular gift of explaining complex estate mechanics in plain language without making you feel like you should have already known them. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, a revocable living trust that has been properly recorded supersedes a will with respect to the assets held inside it. Whatever the will says about the house, if the house was transferred into the trust before her death, it passed to the trust beneficiary at the moment of death, outside of probate, without the will ever touching it. I know, I said. I know you know, Renata said. I'm saying it out loud so you can hear it clearly. They don't own the house, Claire. Whatever your parents think they're walking into on Saturday, they don't own the house. She was right. I added her words to the document. Then I added one more item to the folder. A letter Nana had mailed me 3 months after the trust was established. A handwritten letter on the pale green stationery she kept in her roll-top desk, my name on the front in her careful, looping script. She had written it in case I ever needed to understand why she'd done what she did. I'd read it so many times I could recite it from memory, but I kept it in the folder. I wanted it there on Saturday. Let me tell you something about growing up as the competent child in a family that notices competence mostly in terms of what it can produce. I started working at 16. Grocery store, clothing boutique, coffee shop on weekends. Not because my parents couldn't provide. We weren't poor. We were fine. But fine in my house meant that when something extra came up, the question of who would handle it had an obvious answer. Claire's responsible. Claire will figure it out. In my senior year of high school, Frank's truck needed a new transmission. $1,800. I covered $1,200 from my savings. He paid back $400 6 months later and called it even. I didn't fight it. I filed it. When Derek was 22 and needed a deposit and first month's rent on his first apartment, Sandra called on a Tuesday evening. She said they were a little short, and it would mean so much to Derek, and she knew I'd want to help my brother get started. I sent $900. Derek sent a thumbs-up emoji. When my parents' furnace blew 4 winters ago, I paid for the service call and the parts. $1,400. Frank said he'd pay me back from his tax refund. I am still waiting for that refund. None of this is unusual. Some of you know exactly what I'm describing. The slow accumulation of being the one who can, which slowly becomes the one who does, which slowly becomes the one who's expected to owe without anyone announcing the transition. It happens the way erosion happens, quietly, incrementally, until one day the shape of everything is completely different and everyone acts as if it was always this way. The thing about working in estate law is that you see this pattern in documents. The child who supported the parents is often the one who receives the least from them when the documents finally arrive. Not always. Not inevitably. But often enough that we have internal shorthand for it at our firm. The reliable child tax. I used to think I was immune to it because I could see it clearly. I wasn't. Seeing a pattern doesn't protect you from it. It just means you feel it more precisely when it arrives. Nana saw it before I did. 2 years before she died, she sat me down at her kitchen table after Sunday dinner and said something I have turned over in my mind 100 times since. She said, "Claire Bear, your parents love you in the way they know how to love, and that way has a ceiling. I want you to know that I love you in a way that doesn't." I thought she meant it emotionally. She meant it legally, financially, permanently. Nana was the only person in my family who had ever asked me what I wanted before asking what I could provide. The weekend before the reading, I drove home to check on the house. It wasn't on the market yet, not formally. But a woman named Deborah Kinsley from Weaverville Realty had already tucked her card into the storm door. Comparative market analysis. Compliments of Deborah. Inside, Sandra had organized the living room into 3 piles. Keep, donate, and sell. A sticky note on the china cabinet read antique dealer. Get value. Another note on the oak side table Nana had inherited from her own mother said Derek might want this. I moved through each room. In Nana's bedroom, I picked up the blue and white quilt from the chest at the foot of her bed, the one she'd made herself, and I folded it and put it in my car. Sandra appeared in the doorway while I was in the bedroom. She stood there watching me with her head tilted slightly, the way she did when she was deciding how to frame something she'd already decided. "We've been talking to a realtor," she said. "We think the market's strong right now. The reading's not until Saturday, Mom." She waved her hand. "No reason to wait. We know what the will says. Gerald walked your father and me through it already. Gerald walked us through it. A private briefing before the family reading." I noted that. I kept my face still. "What does it say?" I asked. Sandra's expression arranged itself into something warm and slightly apologetic. "It's fair, sweetheart. Your father and I are listed as primary beneficiaries because we're the closest. But there's something set aside for you and Derek. Gerald will explain everything properly on Saturday. Something set aside. Not an amount. Not a percentage. Something." I nodded. I drove home. That night, I called my father. Not to ask about the will. Not to signal anything. Just to confirm the time on Saturday, like a daughter who doesn't know and isn't preparing and is simply showing up because that's what she does. He sounded relieved when I called. Lighter than he'd been since the funeral. He said it would be good to have everyone together and that things were going to be fine, and that Nana would have wanted this handled as a family. As a family. I said I'd see him Saturday. I set my phone down. I opened the folder one more time, read the chain of title, read Nana's letter, and closed it again. Saturday arrived gray and cold. February in Weaverville is the color of old concrete and the feel of wet wool. I wore the charcoal blazer I wore to hearings when I needed to look like I belonged in a room full of documents. I made coffee. I drove. Gerald Marsh's office sat on Oak Street above a dry cleaner and next to a tax preparation service. The staircase was narrow and the railing wobbled. His waiting room held 4 chairs, a table with a bowl of individually wrapped mints, and a photo of the Biltmore estate hanging slightly crooked on the wall. My parents were already there. Frank wore the navy sweater he wore to every occasion requiring presentability. Sandra was in the blouse I recognized from Christmas. Derek arrived 4 minutes after me in gym clothes, as if the schedule had interrupted something more pressing. He looked at his phone while he sat down. Nobody mentioned the folder on my knee. Patrice led us into Gerald's office. A square room with 2 windows overlooking Oak Street, bookshelves lined with form books and legal reporters. Gerald shook hands with everyone. He had a kind face and the slightly apologetic posture of a man who has conducted enough difficult will readings to have developed a specific posture for them. He offered coffee. Frank declined. Sandra accepted. Derek was still looking at his phone. I set the folder on my knee, folded my hands over it, waited. If you've ever walked into a room already knowing what the other people in it are about to find out and had to sit still while they found it, leave a comment below. Tell me what you said to yourself in those minutes. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what's in this folder is about to change everything in this room. Gerald cleared his throat. He thanked us for coming. He said a few words about Nana, her long relationship with practice, and her clarity of intention. He used that phrase specifically. Clarity of intention. I wrote it on my notepad. Then he opened his own folder. He summarized the estate, the house on Meadowbrook Road, the savings account at First Community Bank, the personal property. He noted the trusts that held the house and said that under the trust terms, the real property would pass according to the trust instrument rather than through the estate. Frank was already nodding. The nod of a man who has been briefed on something and is waiting for confirmation. Gerald continued. The revised will executed last March designated Frank and Sandra Holloway as primary beneficiaries of the estate, defined to include the savings account, personal property, and any assets not held in trust. There was also a bequest to Claire Holloway for $10,000 and a bequest to Derek Holloway for $5,000. Derek looked up from his phone. Frank's nod deepened. Satisfied. I looked at Gerald. He was watching me with the careful attention of a man who has just said something he suspects will be received badly by at least one person in the room. And the house, I said. Gerald paused. The house is held in the Holloway Family Revocable Living Trust, established in 2018. Under the trust instrument, the house passes to the designated successor trustee and sole trust beneficiary upon the grantor's death. He stopped. The room went still. Which is? Frank said. Gerald looked at his papers. Then at Frank. Then at me. Claire Holloway, he said. Frank's nod stopped. Sandra's hand froze on Frank's arm. I said nothing. I let the name stay in the room and do its work. Frank turned to me. His voice was even, controlled, the voice of a man keeping something from boiling over. Claire, this is incorrect. Your mother and I are the beneficiaries. Gerald, there must be an error. Gerald, to his credit, was composed. He explained slowly and precisely. The trust was established in 2018. The house had been transferred into the trust at that time. The transfer was recorded with the county recorder's office. The trust named Claire as the sole beneficiary. The revision will apply only to estate assets. The house was not an estate asset. The house had not been part of the estate since 2018. Frank looked at Sandra. Sandra had gone the particular color of someone watching a calculation fail in real time. Derek said, wait, so who gets the house? Claire does, Gerald said. The trust is unambiguous. Frank leaned forward. He was not yelling. Frank rarely yelled. He was precise in the way that frightened people become precise when they need something to hold on to. Gerald. My mother changed her will. She clearly intended for us to be the primary beneficiaries. Whatever this trust says, we should look at when it was established and whether she was in a competent state when she signed it. Gerald set down his pen with a small, deliberate motion. Mr. Holloway, the trust was established and properly executed in 2018 with full documentation of your mother's legal capacity. It was prepared by a certified estate planning attorney, witnessed by 2 individuals unrelated to the family, and notarized. The chain of title at the county recorder confirms the transfer recorded that same year. Frank's jaw tightened. I opened the folder. I want to be clear about what was in it. Nothing dramatic. No hidden weapon, just paper. The trust instrument, printed from the county records. The deed transfer. A 1-page summary I'd prepared myself. The way we prepare summaries at our firm for clients who need complex information laid out plainly before a difficult meeting. And at the back, in a pale green envelope with my name on the front, Nana's letter. I placed the trust instrument on the desk in front of Gerald. He glanced at it, recognized it, and gave a small nod. I looked at my father. I'm the successor trustee, I said. Which means I've had 3 weeks to confirm everything I needed to confirm. The house is in the trust. The trust is valid. The revision will apply to the estate. The house was not in the estate. Nana moved it 6 years ago. My voice was the voice I use when I explain a document to a client. Level. Factual. No performance in it. Frank stared at me. You knew this before today. Yes. And you said nothing. I came to the reading, Dad. Same as everyone else. You sat there and didn't say a word. What would you have done if I had? I watched his face. Would you have asked to talk about it? Or would you have had someone challenge the trust before Saturday? The room held the silence the way a room holds cold air when a door opens in winter. Frank turned back to Gerald. Is there a way to contest this? Gerald folded his hands on the desk with the steadiness of someone who answers this question regularly and has a standard answer that never gets easier to hear. An asset held in a properly established irrevocable living trust transfers to the beneficiary outside of probate upon the grantor's death. The trust becomes irrevocable at that moment. Grounds to contest would be limited to demonstrating fraud, duress, or lack of capacity at execution. Given that this trust was established in 2018, when your mother was 75 and in documented good health, with full legal formalities observed, the standard would be extremely high. The cost of such a challenge would likely exceed the value of any potential recovery. My mother knew that, I said quietly. She planned accordingly. Sandra's eyes filled. Not the performative kind. The kind that comes when a person realizes they have been outmaneuvered by someone they spent years underestimating. By someone who had loved them carefully enough to be prepared instead of confrontational. This isn't fair, she said. Her voice was small. And for a moment, it was genuinely her voice without the rehearsal underneath it. We're her children. I know, Mom. She wanted us to have the house. She wanted me to have the house. She told me exactly why. She wrote it down. I picked up the pale green envelope from the folder. I didn't open it. I held it for a moment. Then I set it back down. That letter is mine, I said. But I'll tell you what it says. She said she chose me not because she loved me more, but because she trusted me to take care of something she had spent 41 years taking care of. She knew what would happen to it if it passed through the estate. She didn't want it sold. She didn't want a realtor's card in the storm door before the funeral flowers were off the grave. Sandra flinched. I didn't say it to wound her. I said it because it was true, and because Nana had deserved someone to say it. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. Gerald walked through the savings account and the personal property. $22,000 in savings, after expenses, distributed primarily to my parents, with the bequest to Derek and me deducted first. My $10,000. Derek's $5,000. The remaining $7,000 to my parents. Frank signed what needed signing. He stood when Gerald stood. He shook Gerald's hand. He did not shake mine. Derek caught me on the landing at the top of the staircase on the way out. He looked the way Derek always looks when reality has not matched his assumptions. As he arrived somewhere, the furniture was in the wrong room. So the house is yours, he said. Yes. Did you know the whole time? I found out 3 weeks ago when I pulled the county records. He was quiet. He scuffed his shoe against the baseboard. She really left it to you. She did. He looked at the floor. He stopped. I mean, that makes sense, actually. He said it slowly, like someone discovering something they should have seen a long time ago. He walked down the stairs and out into the parking lot. That was Derek's apology. It was the most he had to give. I accepted it completely. I drove to Meadowbrook Road directly from Gerald's office. Unlocked the door with the key that had lived on Nana's hook for years, the one she told me was for when you need a place to come to. I stood in the front hallway and let the house settle around me. It smelled like itself. Pine cleaner and sweet potato and old wood and the specific warmth that old houses hold in their walls fill the way they hold decades. Sandra's sticky notes were still on the china cabinet, on the side table, on the pie hutch in the corner. I peeled them off one by one, folded them, put them in my pocket. I moved Deborah Kinsley's card from the storm door to a kitchen drawer, not to hide it, just to put it somewhere that didn't have a claim on the entrance. Then I sat down at Nana's kitchen table and read her letter one more time. She wrote about the summer I was 27, when she first told me about the trust. She wrote that she'd watched me my whole life, being the reliable 1E1, and had worried for years that reliability had curdled into availability in ways I hadn't agreed to. She wrote that she wanted to give me something that came without a condition, without guilt, without an expectation attached. Just something solid. A place that was mine. The last line read, "The house knows you. Claire Bear. It watched you grow up. Let it watch you be still for a while." I folded the letter. The kitchen was quiet. The tomato pots sat on the porch, empty, the clay cracked from the February cold. I'd replant them in spring. My father called 3 days later. Not to apologize. He called because he had consulted a second attorney and received the same answer Gerald had given him and needed somewhere to put what that felt like. His voice was controlled in the way of someone holding something at arm's length. "I want to understand something," he said. "Your grandmother sat across from me at Christmas 3 years ago and talked about the house as if it were going to stay in the family. It is staying in the family, Dad. It's staying with me." A silence. "She didn't tell us." "I know. Why would she do that?" "Because she loved you. And she knew you." The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't end with an answer because the answer is already in the room and has been there the whole time. Frank said he needed time to think about things. He hung up. That was the last call for 6 weeks. Neither he nor Sandra reached out. Through Derek, I learned they were putting their own house on the market and moving to something smaller. The money from Nana's estate gave them a partial buffer. Not what they'd planned for, not what they'd spent months arranging around, but something. Derek texted me in March. Said Mom is angry, but thinks she's mostly embarrassed. Dad doesn't talk about it. I texted back. That's okay. They don't have to. My colleague Renata asked how I was doing with everything, one morning over coffee in the break room. I said I was fine. She raised an eyebrow because Renata always raises an eyebrow when she thinks Finn is working too hard. I told her the truth. I'm not glad my parents are struggling. There was no moment of triumph in Gerald's office. No victory. There was a reading, a folder, and a name on a deed that said what it said, regardless of what anyone in that room had expected. What I am is settled, which is different from fine. Settled means the ground holds. I went back to Meadowbrook Road the following weekend. Spent Saturday replacing the weather stripping on the back door. Nana had taught me the trick when I was 22. Press firm from the center outward, not from the edges in. She had a way of teaching things by giving you the principle underneath the task, so the task itself became obvious. I was on the back step with the putty knife when the neighbor from 2 houses down, a woman named June who'd lived on Meadowbrook Road almost as long as Nana had, came through the backyard carrying a plate of lemon bars. She said she'd seen my car and wanted to check in. She sat on the bottom porch step while I worked. She talked about Nana, about the tomatoes, about the crossword dictionary, about the year Nana won a blue ribbon at the county fair for her sweet potato pie and hung it on the refrigerator for 6 months until Frank told her it looked tacky. And she said something unrepeatable that June still laughed about. I asked if she'd known about the trust. June was quiet for a moment. She knew Eleanor had done something to make sure the house stayed, she said. Eleanor told me she'd taken care of it. She said she wanted someone in it who would actually listen when the second step creaked. The second step from the bottom of the porch stairs. It's always creaked. I've known since I was 9 years old. I will take care of it, I told June. She patted my hand. Left the lemon bars. Walked home through the backyard the way she'd come. I finished the weather stripping. Then I sat down in the chair that used to be Nana's chair and looked out at Meadowbrook Road for a while. Just sat. There is a particular kind of quiet that lives in a place when the right person is finally in it. I don't know another way to describe it. The house wasn't silent. The second step still creaked. The porch boards shifted in the wind. A cardinal went back and forth from the dogwood to the railing like it had opinions about something. But underneath all of that was a quiet I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. The quiet of being exactly where I was supposed to be. There are 2 kinds of inheritance. There is the kind that goes through a will, that gets argued about in law offices and revised in the final year, and changes depending on who had the most recent conversation with the attorney. And there is the kind that gets transferred quietly, years before anyone expects it to matter, by someone who was paying close attention when no one else was. Nana didn't leave me house. She left me evidence that someone in my family had looked at me and seen me accurately. Not what I could contribute. Not what I could co-sign or cover. Or carry. Me. The girl who asked whether the roof needed patching before she ever asked what the place was worth. The one who showed up. My parents were counting on a document that no longer held what they believed it held. They'd spent months building plans around an asset that was never in the estate, in a future that was never theirs to design. The mistake they made was not greed. Greed is manageable. The mistake was certain. They had been so certain I was the reliable one that they never once considered I might also be the prepared one. The house on Meadowbrook Road is still standing. Green shutters, porch wrapping around the front and halfway down the side, second step still creaking exactly the way it always has. The tomato pots aren't planted yet, but the clay is cleaned out, and I know what I'm putting in this spring. I'll be here on Sunday at 7:30, same as always. Same as she taught me. If someone in your life ever did something quietly to protect you, without telling anyone, without asking for recognition, this story belongs to them. Tell me in the comments who that person was. I read everyone. And if this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear that being prepared is not the same as being cold. That knowing how things work is no betrayal of love. The most loving thing someone can do is make sure the ground holds when you need it. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.